without further ado, it's my great honor to welcome to the stage to a conversation New York State Governor Kathy Hochul. Governor Hochul.
Thank you.
Governor Hochul, thank you so much for joining us at Concordia today. We're grateful for your presence and your leadership.
Thank you, Hannah.
I'll start with a conversation or a question that affects at least 51% of the people in this room. Let's talk about representation and leadership and what it means to be the first female New York governor. How representation across policy and in the decision-making rooms in general is guiding what your administration has led for New York.
Well, I appreciate the question, and it was just a little bit over a year ago when I took the position as governor of the state of New York, and I said at the time, I'm not here to make history, I'm here to make a difference.
Oh, I like that.
And I've lived by that every single day. And you talk about the influence of women. I assembled the smartest team of professionals, people who understood the policies and the challenges facing New Yorkers to be part of my team. And it's not a coincidence that probably 95% of them are women, okay. The people I rely on every day. So you can intentionally say, I am seeking the brightest. And very often you're going to end up with some very talented women. And I'm proud of what they do. But also, it's all an intentional decision to do things differently. And I came out of a place rising up through many years of public service. I was always the only woman. When I ran for my local town board, I was the only countywide woman official. I was the, representing a seat in Congress where there were only 20% of women. So I'm very accustomed to being the only woman, but I want to end this era, and I want to make it normal that people will see women in top leadership positions, and that is why I feel like my success hinges on this as well. Not just to be successful personally, but also to say to everybody who thinks that New York State has to be governed in a certain manner, in a rough and tumble way because it's a complex state. But a woman can do this. And so no one will ever question the ability of a woman to do this. So that's the perspective I bring to this. And it also drives my policy decisions because I'm always going to say, how does that affect a working mom? Is she going to be able to work that job? What about childcare? What about workforce development? So it does frame things differently when you have a woman in these positions, and that's how we execute our policies really across the administration.
That's brilliant. And across the board, representation across gender, demographies, economic classes, et cetera, all change the way somebody approaches a challenge, a lived experience, and then of course the policies have to reflect for that non-uniform perspective. So wonderful. You've committed towards a new era of collaboration, which at Concordia we love. We're all about public-private partnerships, cross-sector collaboration, our convene, connect, create model. Can you speak a little bit about how you approach collaboration, what that looks like in a practical sense from the day-to-day and the variety of challenges you're facing?
It's again a decision. I can decide to carry on the way people expect, or I can do it differently. I'm doing it differently. What does that look like? It means for the first time in decades, the governor of the state of New York works with the mayor of New York City. Now, I know that's headline breaking news, but we've worked so closely on public safety and homelessness and affordable housing because we can do so much more together. So breaking down the institutional acceptance that you always have to be in a combative format, I said, no, we work together, and I think it just also gives people some confidence in their leadership too. It's not about our egos and not about us knocking each other around, scoring political points. It's about who's doing the most work together for the state of New York and the people. But also in the private sector, when I look at complicated projects like Penn Station, that could have been sitting there for years and years to come because of the lack of cooperation with organizations like Amtrak,
right,
and the governor of New Jersey, and the people who live in the community, and the private partners, and we just pull them all together and we say, we have to get this done. It is a disgrace that the greatest city in the planet, I'm sorry if anybody's from anywhere else, but this is New York, it's how we talk and it's true. You deserve to have a world-class experience when you're coming in on your daily commute or you're visiting for the first time, and Penn Station does not give you that. It feels like you're in the depths of hell when you should have the skies of the heavens opened up and looking at you, and that's what we're going to do. So that's just one example where we literally a year ago said we're going to do this, and we are on a fast track to get that done. Same thing with Terminal 1 out at JFK, another project that people thought couldn't happen.
Much nicer, by the way.
And LaGuardia, those projects are great, but we're doing yet another, the largest terminal expansion in the country. Okay. We just did a groundbreaking for, and again, it's going to be driven by MWBs. A lot of women minority-owned business, at least 30% of that. But again, the private partners I had to pull into this, for the funding, the airlines and the equity partners. We had We had incredible people stepping up to help. So it's just about getting a room, putting egos aside and saying, okay, let's get this done. And we've had tremendous success just using that very basic model that I believe is natural to a lot of women as well.
Mm-hmm. That collaboration, and I like the roll up your sleeves, get it done, but make sure the right people are around the table to do it.
Exactly.
Because it is an opportunity for economic empowerment and just expansion in so many ways. So it's great that that pie has gotten bigger. You mentioned a few of the areas that you're working specifically with the City of New York on, but can you share a bit about, as we're coming or emerging, hopefully, from this pandemic, but it's affected so many people in so many different ways, what are some of the policy priorities or things that are really kind of on your table today? You're leaving us at, this morning. What are you going to next, and what's on your mind?
Well, I'll tell you where I'm going next. I just spoke at the Clinton Global Initiative. I'm now heading to a subway stop and to talk about how we're putting cameras inside our trains so people feel safer on the subways.
I was literally just speaking about that with a colleague, and just the idea of safety on the subways. So
that's right. That is one of the barriers.
We solved it this morning.
Well, I never say we're done with anything, but we're making progress. People have to have that sense of security in our public transit, on our streets, pushing a stroller, walking to your office. Yeah. That's job number one, which is why working with the mayor, working with governors of other states. I have 9 governors working together to get guns off the streets. No one ever did that before. But that's just one of our challenges, and we're working on that. But also, this pandemic put a spotlight on glaring inequities that have existed a long time in healthcare, and also the disparities in who's doing the work, who are the essential workers, and why was it mostly women that lost their jobs or had to be the ones who showed up during the horrific experience where they did long days and hours working in hospitality, working in hospitals. So our budget reflected that. We helped our nurses be stabilized. A lot of them left the workforce. We just had $10 billion on the table to help our healthcare systems get it back on their feet, as well as money directly to our healthcare providers, the nurses in particular, who really were hit hard by this pandemic, helping them get a little more money in their pocket. So that was an intentional investment in people and in systems we have to bring back. Affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to live in New York. That's a great thing. But we have to have affordability so people who grew up here can grow up and live in the same community where they can raise their kids like they were raised. And that's a barrier. So I'm working on finding really clever ways to look at existing housing stock. We're going to be making a lot of changes in our law this year. But also, I look at things, I walk around Midtown all the time. I'm looking at buildings, commercial buildings that are 40% full. Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, if that's how it's going to be year 2, if it's going to be that way year 3, the rest of the space, if we can change some zoning, right, get some state laws changed, look at the space differently. Can there be these hybrid models where you actually have people living in some of these buildings as well? Mm-hmm. And I also say what's going to fix a lot of problems, put a child care facility in these buildings, mm-hmm, put a child care space. To all enlightened businesses, if you're expanding, you do this, you'll have no trouble recruiting men and women who want to go to work but don't want to worry about whether or not they're going to find reliable childcare. You bring that to the workplace, there's no stopping you. So I focus on this, and when I talk to companies that are looking for financial support, economic development investments in them, and I can say, okay, now you're at the table wanting help from the taxpayers, what are you doing to help your workers as well? And it's a good thing for the business, but it's also a great thing for the families of New York. So those are just a couple areas. It's about expanding childcare, affordability of housing, public safety, but also we are leaning so hard into the green energy revolution. I'm excited about this. And our Green Chips Initiative, $10 billion on the table. Anybody in semiconductors, this is the place you want to grow your business, leveraging the $52 billion from the federal government. Thank you, Joe Biden, for that, because we jumped out the first state. We know the money is going to be on the table for companies to expand here or come back here where they belong. But what state they're going to go to? They're going to come to New York now because of our aggressive approach. So those are just a couple of top-of-mind things we're working on, but it's an exciting time. It's at a time when people are just looking for leadership. They're looking for that sense of inevitability, that's regaining the feeling of being real New Yorkers again. Mm-hmm. And the traffic is back. That's a good New York feeling. I feel like we're back to, okay, it's not so bad. It was a lot worse when the streets were like a bowling alley, I'm telling you right now. So it's a good thing. But I feel the energy, but I also have to convey that sense of confidence in the future, so businesses will also follow that.
I think that's great, and certainly something for other states to also be listening to and learning, and cities around the world, of course, as we're thinking about this tension of society and as employees, but also humans as a whole. So
that's right. That's right.
Wonderful. So Concordia, broadly, myself included, we're passionate about democratic ideals and that want to serve as a forum to bring people together to kind of engage across those spaces and ensure that we're advancing all of the liberties that it entails. So as we think about democracy here in the United States, we know we're at a very interesting point in history. And I'd like to hear what you think are some of the biggest challenges facing democracy, both in the New York State, but then also more broadly as a nation that turns to look to you.
No, this is very much top of mind, and we think about the origins of democracy. Go back to Greece. The ancient Greeks devised a form of government that is enduring to this day, and is something that we always took for granted in our country, like we took for granted, rights like women's reproductive freedoms. There's a lot of things we just took for granted that we now realize are precious. They can be lost.
Yes.
And if we don't stand up as citizens and say, no, this is the government we want, and we don't want people to question the results of elections, because that is a destabilizing force, but also access to the ballot box. We just passed in the state of New York the John Lewis voting rights law that was not accepted in Congress. I served with John Lewis in Congress, and I said, let his name be on the legislation. We say we're making sure we have full access to voting, and people having confidence in their results.
Right.
We believe there should be early voting, because why does it all come down to one day a year when you have busy moms getting their kids off to school, and they're going to their jobs, and they're going to go to their classes at the community college at night, and they might check in on their parents, and oh my God, it's after 9 o'clock and I didn't vote. Okay, don't make it so hard for people. So we have 10-day early voting in the state of New York that should be easier to register to vote. I mean, it is a privilege, but it shouldn't be such so hard to attain that.
Right.
So we're focused on that. We just passed this year, and I'm proud of that. But I want all New Yorkers to know, and the rest of the country, this should be a model for what you do. It should be easier to vote, but also election integrity. We have a lot of cybersecurity mechanisms put in place so people will trust the results of our elections, because that's how we protect the democracy in the state of New York. And nationwide, we have to call out when we see injustices in other states, and indeed people who are election deniers, who will not continue the century-long practice of opposing parties accepting the results of a duly administered election. So that's what we have to do as citizens too. Stand up and seize this and say, this is ours, this is precious, this is who we are. I'm not going to let it slip away.
As a follow-up to that, how can citizens best convey that? What's in your ideas in terms of getting people, if I'm a voter, right? So if I do have those concerns, what's the best way to reach out and engage with a government that feels sometimes far away?
And also there's a responsibility on the citizen for the privilege of living in a country like this. People have lost their lives on battlefields around the world defending your right to vote.
Right.
And if you don't show up to vote, that's a basic obligation of citizenship. But to inspire people to vote and get them motivated to vote, they have to realize that when they sit back and let others decide that, you kind of forfeit your right to complain. You can't say, well, I don't like that person, I don't like that Did you get out and vote? Did you actually participate in this? Because if you didn't, okay, next person, I want to hear from the people who actually care enough to show up. But we also have to give them something to vote for. Get them enlightened leaders that they'll say, this is the person leading the country, the state, my congressional district that I believe in. And so the candidates also have a responsibility to fire them up. And what I would say is, just this election this year, say Roe v. Wade, say the Dobbs decision. I mean, if there's women in this country who say it doesn't matter who's in office, well, guess who picks the judges on a Supreme Court? I mean, this is a fundamental right that we've had for all these years in this country.
Or school board curriculum.
And again, I've served at every level of government except school board. Okay. I may get there someday. Maybe it's probably going to be the toughest one yet. But that is where citizens can rise up, sit there, and do everything to support the education of children. There's nothing more important. So citizen engagement is what keeps us strong. It keeps us meeting the challenges of each generation. And it's an exciting time. And I don't want complacency to sit in. That is my greatest fear, that people say it doesn't matter anymore. I'm old enough to remember as a kid watching the Vietnam War divide our country, the riots around the convention in 1968. I was a little kid. The assassination of John Kennedy, the assassination of Dr. King, and Watergate. I mean, if you ever talk about a time in our history when everything felt like it was really falling apart and we're never going to come back, I lived through that in my early years when I was just starting to pay attention to what politics and leadership is all about. Fast forward a generation, I'm still as optimistic about our country as I was back then as a child. And I want this generation, younger people, to say, no, if we engage, if we participate, we can make it even better. So I just don't want citizens to become complacent. I want them to care. And it's up to us to inspire that.
Thank you so much, Governor. We appreciate your leadership, the ideas you've shared on our stage about governance and inclusive decision-making and a broader impact for all of communities. And we appreciate you taking the time today to walk us through.
Thank you very much, Anna. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.